In this video, I want to talk about The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. And this book was published in 1973 and it won the Pulitzer Prize in 1974, 2 months after Ernest Becker died. It's a work of nonfiction, and in it, Becker explores the question of what drives human behavior. His conclusion, just the short answer, is that it's our awareness of death, our awareness of our mortality. And the main idea behind this book is that we, as far as we know, we are the only animals that are aware of our own mortality, aware that we'll die, aware that we are alive in this moment, that we can distinguish between past, present, and future. We're the only beings with consciousness. And this is a double-edged sword. So we can interpret the world in an absolutely beautiful way. We can know all these things and perceive all these things and think in really complex, intelligent ways. But at the same time, we are aware of things we might be better off not knowing, not being aware of. And the main thing is that we'll die, that we're mortal, and that every living thing dies at some point. So Ernest Becker argues that the knowledge that we'll die someday is too awful for us to be able to bear, for us to be able to cope with it. And this terror causes so much anxiety when we try to think about it, that we develop all these coping mechanisms, including repression, in order to be able to deal with it. And that is what constitutes the denial of death, that is the title of the book. All of these mechanisms that we put in place from a very young age in order to deal with the fear of death. So the first thing that I want to talk about is heroism. And in heroism, Becker explains in the book, is basically this impulse that we all have to take on a role in society, or just a role in general, that makes us feel fulfilled and that our lives have meaning and this sort of cosmic significance, he calls it. So, for example, if someone's a celebrity, they might be on TV and admired by people, and some strangers might ask for autographs and all these things that reassure them that what they're doing has some meaning in the society that they live in. Another example is a guy who goes to high school and he's a really popular athlete. As long as he keeps on doing what everybody expects of him, he will feel like he's fulfilling this role that he has within the bubble that he finds himself in. And all this meaning that I'm talking about is socially constructed. And it also varies between different societies in the world. So some people might have a specific tradition that will dictate that something specific has meaning, but another society might deem that completely worthless or wrong and might give meaning to something completely different. So that's heroism, and that's at the core of this book. But how does this relate to the denial of death? So when I say denial of death, and what Becker means in here is our subconscious belief that we can be immortal, that we can live forever, either symbolically or literally. And it's not our bodies that can live forever. We know logically that we will die, but somebody who's a believer, somebody who believes in heaven, will believe that their soul moves on to an afterlife. for example, and that is literal immortality, because once your body dies, your soul is moving on to an afterlife. And then there's symbolic immortality, and that is living through the memories that people have of you, the things that people say about you once you're gone. So in the case of the celebrity, that person knows that once, the more famous they become, the more likely it is that people will continue to talk about them once they're gone. So people like Hitler knew that the huge impact that he had on the world would mean that people would continue to talk about him throughout history. And this symbolic immortality assures us that, or at least makes us believe subconsciously, that we are not going to perish and that people won't forget us. And so that is what Becker thinks drives behavior and motivates people to take on these roles, these heroic roles. And so that is what it's at the core of the book and the main idea. And I'm going to talk about other things discussed in the book that are obviously related to this main idea, but that's what's at the core of it. So Becker talks about transference, and this is a term that was coined and developed by Freud. I think it was coined by Freud as well, but it was the idea was developed by Freud, and it's this idea that a person will transfer the feelings that they have towards their parents, more specifically the mother, but it's the parents. So these feelings of feeling secure when their parents are around, or feeling like they can trust their parents and their parents are their guides, and all of these positive feelings towards their parents, they will transfer to other people in their lives as they grow up. So an example that Becker gives in the book is that transfer feelings towards a therapist. So if an adult needs a therapist when they grow up, they might transfer all these feelings of towards the therapist and feel like the therapist is their guide, and they become sort of the person they trust and the person they rely on. And this can be a dangerous dynamic, because a therapist really doesn't want to be in the position where a client will, or a patient will, fully depend on them. So that is transference, but what I found really fascinating was how it worked when it came to groups. So picture a bully at a high school, this big bully that persuades a bunch of people, and we can call them his followers, to bully people with him or for him or whatever. This bully has the power of saying what's right and what's wrong. Bullying other people is okay. This is what you should do. This is what you must do. And then the followers, if they choose to transfer those feelings towards the bully, or if they choose to follow the bully, they will find reassurance in the fact that the bully knows what he's talking about. And they will follow him, sometimes more willingly than other times, but if they choose to follow him, the things that they do for this bully, they won't do as remorsefully, guiltily as they would if they did it for themselves, because they believe that what this person is saying is right. And they form their own identity through, they form their own identity through that dynamic that they have with the leader, and they draw meaning from their actions because they have this higher, not higher being, but this leader, this person that means a lot to them, and they assume is right in what they're saying, telling them what they should do. And so it feels almost like they're believing in this God that's telling them what to do. And that might seem a little far-fetched, but it's just a metaphor. And then similarly, the bully will draw meaning from that dynamic that he has with the group, and also shape his own identity according to these followers that he has. So without the followers, the bully wouldn't have that identity as the leader. And same with the followers, they wouldn't have that identity nor that meaning through what they're doing without the leader. And a big example that Becker gives in the book is the Manson family. And the leader in this case was Charles Manson, a serial killer in the United States. Maybe in the 60s, I'm not exactly sure. But Charles Manson was a very charming person, and he persuaded a bunch of people to kill for him, kill with him, support him in his own killings. And his followers or his family did these terrible things. And the reason why he was able to persuade so many people was because they all believed in him. They all transferred those feelings towards this figure that they admired and they worshipped, and they felt like everything Charles Manson was saying was right. Maybe not everything, but I mean, part of what he was saying, at least, they felt was right. And that's what allowed them to kill for him and do horrible things without feeling like what they were doing was wrong. So I found that absolutely fascinating, just how groups like that work psychologically, how cults work, and why people choose to follow these leaders. So yeah, that was great to read about. Something else that I wanted to talk about was the section in which Becker talks about the philosopher Kierkegaard. And while Kierkegaard was a philosopher, Becker also calls him the first psychotherapist, just because of his huge influence on psychotherapy and his very insightful ideas. And I wanted to mention really quickly, something that I really liked about this book was how Becker took ideas from different areas of study. So he drew ideas mainly from psychology, obviously, but also some from anthropology. Becker was an anthropologist, and also from philosophy, like Kierkegaard's ideas. So I really liked how he just blended all those areas and to shape his theory. So Kierkegaard, and something that I found really fascinating was how he talked about the two sides of a person, the animal side and the symbolic side, or the symbolic self that he called it. And the animal side is basically our bodies, what makes us animals, the limits that has, and also our needs as animals, so to eat and sleep and all of that. And then there's the symbolic self, which can be understood as our soul or our mind or our consciousness, depending on how you want to interpret it. But it's basically that which we think other animals don't have, and which allows us to look at the possibilities that we have, and our imagination, which allows us to just picture things that we might not even be able to do with our bodies. So this idea of the limitless versus the thing that is limited, the body. So Kierkegaard believed that the development of the self could only happen while taking both these sides into account. So if we picture a sphere with half of it being the animal self and the other half being the symbolic self, and then we picture a little point at the center of the sphere, that being the self can only develop in a straight line right between the animal and the maybe not right between, but taking into account both the animal and the symbolic self, if that makes any sense. And then, and the reason he says that is because it's possible to fall into one extreme or the other. So Becker explains that Kierkegaard said that if one falls more into the animal self side, one is more likely to obey or focus on their needs as an animal and their impulse to be part of a role in society, and to focus way too much on that side of who they are. And that is a way of losing the self, because you're not taking into account the symbolic side. And then the other extreme is towards the symbolic side. And this is when a person is too focused on their own, on their self, and they don't take into account these groups. They don't focus on the limitations of the body, but rather on the limitlessness of their mind, and they forget to create meaning through these roles that we talked about before. So those extremes are both called different types of psychoses. So depressive psychosis is the one in which you fall towards the animal side, and schizophrenic psychosis is the one in which you fall towards the symbolic self. And in both cases, you lose the self because you're missing a part. And I found that really interesting and easy to apply to my own life. And that is something else that I really like about the book. And that is that everything that I read, I could see in my own life, or I could apply to my own life. I would, as I was reading the book, and even after, I would go outside, see people. I mean, not that many people, obviously, but go outside and just live my life. And even if I'm by myself, I would recognize all of these patterns and behaviors and see everything that Becker was talking about. So it's one of those books that just makes you see the world in a completely different way. And I really love that. So yeah, I thought that aspect of it was also great, and a great aspect of the reading experience. So that's Kierkegaard. One more thing about Kierkegaard is that he believed that there was a way of transcending this denial of death, that there was a way for people to fully accept that they were going to die, and without the need of repressing anything. And he thought that the way to do this was to surrender completely and die in a way, and then be reborn. But the only way to be reborn and be able to cope with death was to believe in a higher being, was to take a leap of faith and believe in God. So that was Kierkegaard's main conclusion about this whole topic, and one he ended up applying to his own life, to take that leap of faith and fully accept and transcend that denial of death. So that was Kierkegaard, and I found that section absolutely fascinating to read. And then something that I wanted to quickly mention is that Ernest Becker talks about Otto Rank, and Rank was a psychotherapist that Becker admired tremendously, and he was inspired by his works to write The Denial of Death. And the main work that he talks about by Otto Rank is Art and Artist. And in it, Rank talks about not only the creative individual and how that they create art, but also how everyone in society is sort of this artist that creates roles and all of these things in order to find meaning for their own lives. So I just wanted to quickly mention that Otto Rank is a huge part of this. He has a whole section dedicated to him. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about which is the last section before the conclusion of the book, and that is on mental health. Becker believed that all mental illnesses stemmed from low self-esteem, and that this low self-esteem came from not being able to find a role that you could fulfill properly in your life, so you wouldn't draw meaning or the meaning that you need from that role, and that would cause low self-esteem, and that would cause a mental illness. So you can see how this is all related. And I find that a very generalized statement, but also very insightful in a way. And Becker does mention at the beginning of that section that it is a very generalized thing, but that he felt like the book would be incomplete without a section on mental health. So I fully understand that, and I think it was necessary. I like that section, but like I said, it was in very generalized terms. And I would like to read that more in depth. Maybe if someone wrote a book about that, I would love to read that, because I find that I find mental health overall very fascinating. And then so that's sort of the last section I want to talk about, and the conclusion, obviously. And when I talked about these roles in society and this constructed meaning and all of that, it might seem like it's all negatively connotated, kind of, but Becker actually says that it's not wrong to have all these coping mechanisms in place, because they're there for a reason. There's a reason why we develop them. There's a reason why we seek meaning this way, and it's simply because we cannot cope with not having them. We cannot cope with the terror of death. So whether it's through Kierkegaard's leap of faith, or making your own art and finding meaning in that, which is something that I didn't talk about, but I briefly talked about it when I talked about Otto Rank, but being an artist and having the talent of an artist, that Becker mentions that talent is an important thing, but being an artist allows you to sort of create your own meaning through your art and make something meaningful that way. So whether it's Kierkegaard's leap of faith, or the artist, or being a parent, or whatever role that you take on, we all need something like that in order to cope with the fear of death, and with the awareness of death, rather. So that is the main conclusion, and that those are the main things that I got away from the book. Like I said, found it to be a very fascinating, insightful study of the human condition. I would recommend this to anybody who found any of the things that I said fascinating or interesting in the slightest. I think you really might enjoy this. It's really well written as well. I found it very accessible. There were some parts that were a bit dense, but it was very readable throughout, and it was definitely worth reading. A 5-star read. I normally don't rate, but this one's easy to rate. It's definitely a 5-star read. So thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any comments, anything that you thought was interesting that I mentioned, or if you've read the book, or if you want to read the book, just let me know. Thank you for watching.